Yep.
Glad to be with you again for another edition of the Leadership Conversation Show. This is the show where we explore the application of leadership within a world that matters to you. Today, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Latanya Hughes, and today we are going to be talking about the why of leadership. Now, if you've been watching this show, we always talk about leadership, of course, hence the name of the show. But I don't know if we ever talked about the why of leadership, and considering everything that is going on in our social political sphere, which is seemingly the hot topic these days, we wanted to talk about the why of leadership. But before we get started, wanted to give Latanya an opportunity to introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll jump into the conversation for today.
Well, it's me again. So I'm Dr. Latanya Hughes, the Global Mentor Coach. I basically just love all things leadership. I personally believe that leadership is a lifestyle. It doesn't have anything to do with your title or position, but it's basically an expression of everything that you value, what you believe. So it's how you carry yourself from day to day, the decisions you make. So it's a whole series of different things that encompass who you are as a person. So that's who I am, and glad to be here talking about my favorite subject.
Hey guys, and as I said, Dr. William Clark here. I am a lover of leadership, and I have recently put together a bio, Latanya, and one of the things I said in my bio is that I am a nonprofit leader in Connecticut, and I think that accurately describes my work. In addition to being a nonprofit leader, I do consult nonprofits and churches as well as teach at several universities. So quite busy in the world of leadership. But we want to talk about the why of leadership. And Latanya, I just wanted to kind of kick off this conversation today with our first question. And that question is, why is leadership necessary? And for those of you who are watching, I mean, many of the people that Latanya and I, Philip and Karen, we talk to are folks who are certainly movers and shakers in their own sphere, and typically that centers around the nonprofit, for-profit arena, and sometimes academia. But the hot topic these days is what's going on in politics. But I think for those of you who are looking to learn about leadership, this is a broad enough question that can apply to any area of interest. But Latanya, let's kind of kick this conversation off. Why is leadership important?
Well, you guys kind of know my philosophy. I just told you my philosophy on leadership is that leadership is a lifestyle. It's something that governs our lives. So whether it's an organization, a government, your family, your community, whatever it is, it's an expression. It's an extension of us. It's an outward representation or an expression of who we are, what we value, and what we believe. So to me, leadership is necessary because it affects everything around us. It doesn't just affect us as people. So if I make a decision that I think is only going to affect my life, that's not true, because it may affect my neighbor. So what if I decide to get a dog, for instance, or a parrot? I am not a parrot person, but I'm just saying, what if I get a parrot and that parrot is just going on and on and on and on and on, morning, noon, and night? That decision doesn't just affect me, but it affects my neighbors as well. Mm-hmm. So, and the same thing if you have a dog, if you walk your dog, and you don't pick up after your dog, that decision affects not just you and your dog, it affects the community. It not only affects the community, it becomes a health hazard, but it affects those who are, the groundskeeper, the landscapers, because that gets into their equipment, and now that's another issue. So every decision we make, whether we think it only affects us or not, is not true. It affects everyone. It's kind of like that butterfly effect thing that you see that goes around. Every decision we make affects other people. So leadership is necessary because it's really about how we govern ourselves as individuals, but also as a collective. It just makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, leadership is important and necessary because somebody has to do the process or the job of influencing folks. Right. And if there's nobody doing that, then a group of people who are coming together for a common cause have no direction. Right. So leadership provides the direction that's needed. I think what has turned a lot of people off about leadership is that the execution of leadership by bad leaders in title has harmed a bunch of folks. I mean, you've had leaders in all spheres of business and operation who have misused their position, who have mistreated people, who have not treated people with respect, who have abused their power, who have been unuseful in so many ways. And that is what many people see as leadership because of someone's position or title. As a result, people have translated that experience to a generalization of what leaders do, who they are, and have either internalized that pain and are turned off by all leaders, regardless of what a future leader may or may not do. In other cases, we find people who internalize that experience and actually become what they've hated, because that's the only example that they know. Right. And so even if I'm taking that perspective about why leadership is important, I think from a resetting perspective, we were just talking before we started recording this about some of our friends who are entering new leadership responsibilities. I have certainly entered into something new. We have a tough job in terms of resetting expectations of people who have been hurt and burned by previous leadership and previous administrations. And so in my role, in terms of leading a team, leadership is definitely necessary to reset expectations, to reset an understanding of what a real leader is and what that person does, and also to provide appropriate direction and guidance for the team as they decide to move forward with the train or not.
I think you made a valid point here about resetting, about when you come into a leadership role and really working with people who have been abused and damaged. I tell people all the time, what makes me an expert in leadership is the fact that I've been failed. I've been on the receiving end of bad leadership repeatedly. I've been one of those people who have been abused by leaders. I've had experiences. And I think one of the biggest things is I just within myself wanted to be the person who didn't want to continue the cycle. I didn't want to hurt anybody. So I wanted to position myself to be a person who can really protect, if that makes any sense, or really try to help other people avoid some of the pitfalls that I experienced by seeing a pattern of behavior in other people. So when I coach and counsel people, I'll say, okay, and I'll remember and I'll think, okay, what did I do during that time? And what do I wish I had done differently so that I can better advise that person on how to navigate those waters? It makes a difference. And even now when I go through things, having leaders above me that I'm actually training them because I know more about what they're doing than they do, it's kind of like, okay, you're evaluating me on something and I'm actually training you on how to do that. How is this possible? And you have people who may not be as mature or, in the landscape of the organization or whatever it is, even in the community, that's kind of like, I'm supposed to respect you. I'm supposed to take leadership and advice and guidance and direction from you, but and it's very difficult for a lot of people. And so it's kind of like when you talk about reset, the first thing I think about is just transform your mind a little bit. And really kind of get to a point where you realize that what that person is reflecting onto you or, trying to put off onto you isn't about you, it's about them. And it boils down to something we talk about all the time here, self-leadership. So even though that person may not be good at leading themselves and governing themselves, okay, you as the follower, you want to lead yourself. So sometimes, the best thing about being a leader, what makes a person a good leader is their ability to follow. And so some followers really should be leaders, and they are leaders because you don't know who else is looking at you as how to govern their lives. So it has a trickle down effect again, like I said in the beginning. So I think leadership is necessary. How that leadership is expressed boils down to maturity. I really think leadership requires growth and development, but it really, really requires maturity that I think a lot of people don't have. Leadership is not about and when I say maturity, I'm not talking about a person's age. We know you can look, let's just take the political, what we're seeing now in politics.
Yep.
People are well in age, that we're seeing a lot of the sandbox activity that's going on. So age does not equal maturity. I've always said that age has nothing to do with maturity. There's some 15-year-olds that are way more mature than some 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old people. So age doesn't necessarily equal maturity. It's about the growth and what you learn through your life and through life lessons and situations, or just reading the news, or just different things that help you grow and mature and come up with these decisions or actions or different things that help you govern your life and your decisions accordingly. So I just wanted to kind of chime in on that whole point about resetting. Sometimes it's all about in your mind and how you choose to approach different situations.
Yep. Let's kind of shift the conversation a little bit about how leadership is being expressed in our political discourse today. We have a number of challenges on the table right now. Our political leaders are wrestling with healthcare. Our political leaders are wrestling with immigration. Our political leaders are getting ready to wrestle with taxes and the budget. How is political leadership being expressed today as you see it? What do you see as good leadership practices? What do you see as leadership practices that can use some reworking?
I think all of it needs some reworking, to be honest. I think what we're seeing, honestly, is maturity, lack of maturity. We're seeing a lot of sandbox stuff. We're seeing a lot of distractions. And my question is, why are you trying to distract the American people or the world from what's really at hand? I think we're seeing some, and that's just the bulk of it. This is not everybody, but that's kind of what's in our face. You know what I mean? It's like what we're seeing now is I'm going to put my hand up so you can't really see what's really going on. You know what I mean? So it's like all you see is a head and a face, but what's really going on? I think what we're seeing is a bunch of distraction. I saw something really interesting this morning. It talked about Rachel Maddow. She's one of the political correspondents. I don't know what station. I don't know if it's MSNBC, CNBC, but it's one of those.
Yep.
MSNBC. And it talked about how she stopped reporting on the president's tweets and focused on just issues, everything that's going on, and her ratings skyrocketed. Why? What that tells me is people are interested in information and news. They're not interested in the distractions. They're interested in what's on the table. When it comes to healthcare, I saw that there's a new report by, it's a neutral party, OBD, I think it is. But they talked about how they looked at the new reform that's on the table, and 24 million Americans will be without healthcare. And it won't bring the price of healthcare down. It's going to increase the price of healthcare. So it's and premiums and insurance. And I find it interesting that even before their report, the healthcare industry and I think it was the American Medical Association actually rejected it and said, this is a bad recommendation. So I think now what we're seeing is a lot of people are actually pushing past the distractions. They're pushing past the alternative facts. They're pushing past all of that because people are interested in what's really happening, and they want open dialogue and open conversation about what's happening here in America. I find it interesting that we've dropped down to number 5, I believe now, as one of the most influential nations in the world, after being, number 1 for, as long as I can remember, umpteen years. So now we're down to number 5. I think that makes a difference, and people may not think that it's important, but I think it is. It speaks a lot to the political strength and the trust that people around the world have in our nation. There's some, I think that what I find about what we're experiencing is this. I don't necessarily agree with everything. I didn't agree with everything with every administration that's comes through. And I think that's just realistic. It is what it is. You're not going to please everybody. We are the United States of America. Decisions have to be made for everybody. I think what I have issue with is the lack of tact and respect that decisions are made and enforced It just makes us look heartless as a nation. And I just don't see how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what it does is it brings about an image of contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes people question our leadership, to be quite frank with you. So I think that we definitely right now need some training in diplomacy. I think that's important, or as the French would call it, it's a French term called savoir-faire, understanding, it's knowing what to do in certain situations, specifically social situations. I think we definitely need some training and some development in that area politically. I think, definitely against in some areas in diplomacy and understanding cultures. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you start talking about the political landscape, especially some of the conversations now around babies and with the senator who made the comments about the babies and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I saw on Anderson Cooper, there was an interview with another senator, and he just made it plain. He said he's just using a different type of rhetoric for saying "Make America White Again," which is what a lot of people have always felt and thought. And I think that when we start spinning words, we're in trouble. I mean, and I'm not saying that we haven't always been spinning words, but this is at a different level. And again, I think it just goes back to training on diplomacy, savoir-faire, and just overall tact and respect and dignity when it comes to conversations. And whether or not we are really going to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. We may not agree with a lot of the decisions, but if the Constitution allows for it, then we need to respect and honor the Constitution. And if we cannot do that, perhaps we need to find another nation that aligns with our values. And I just think that that's part of the shift that we're seeing. We're seeing people who, a lot of extremism. And I think I've said this before, some of the rhetoric that we're hearing and seeing around, especially the political discourse, is very dangerous. Yesterday, I saw some statistics that showed that violent crimes and specifically racial crimes, are up 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Since this new administration took over. And if you don't believe that a campaign that's built upon certain rhetoric doesn't influence behavior, those statistics alone should tell you that it does.
Yeah.
And it has to come from the top if we want to see anything different.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that we got a post here in response to one of our tweets from Dominique, who said that I asked a question online, why is leadership important? He said leadership is important because that's what it takes to grow a vision to reality. And I thought that was a nice post there to articulate why leadership is important. To talk about a little bit about how leadership is being expressed in a political discourse. And one of the things that I was taking notes here as you were talking is that leadership is not bullying. Leadership is not strong arming. Leadership is about inclusion. Right. And what we're observing in our political sphere right now is that we're seeing a lot of bullying and strong arming and non-inclusion as bills are being discussed, as investigations are being threatened, etc. And, one of the things that I think we probably need to get our arms around is that, in fact, even in our political sphere, leadership is about the coming together of the minds. Whether, if you're watching this broadcast, whether it's in your organization, whether it's in your community center, in your nonprofit, in your small business, in a partnership that you have with other folks in your family, if you will, leadership is about bringing a group of folks together for a common cause. There has to be overlap that exists when leaders are having conversations. Even when leaders are having conversations with themselves or with their followers, there has to be overlap that brings us together. And I think from a political standpoint, at a minimum, what brings us together on a political scale is our allegiance to our country, the fact that we live here, the fact that we like the quality of life, and of course, want to see it get better, the fact that we want to see America do well at all times. And I think that's normal. That should be expected of anyone who has any sense of pride of where they are, whether it's their personal residence, whether it's their city, their state, or even their country. If that is the impetus of what brings us together, then the conversation has to start there. And I get the fact that there are different opinions and different strategies on how we should move forward. But I am a big fan of being the leader who isn't beholden to my way of doing things or to my idea. The fact that I have an idea, I think, is a light bulb moment in and of itself, because leaders should be able to contribute. That's kind of what we're going to talk about at the Emerging Leaders Conference that's coming up on April 1st. Being able to be a contributing leader. Leaders are not people who just sit back and let everybody do the work. There has to be a contribution of the leader. So the leader should contribute, but I think there is something to be said that even though my idea is a contribution, my idea is not the sole idea that must be implemented or accepted. That is something that I have introduced into my leadership, something that I find very valuable in how I guide my teams going forward and in the past. And so as we talk about political leadership, I'm interested in seeing more of our political leaders take the position that I have an idea and I'm contributing my idea, but I want to see how my idea can be merged with the ideas of my peers who may be on the same side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle as I am, because it is about benefiting everybody that I represent. And of course, you benefiting the people that you represent. And I think that has to be flat out on a table. I think that folks are getting tired of people taking sides. This is no different from, for those of you who are watching, people who are in an organization and you have a leader who exclusively takes the side of management and ignores the perspective of staff. And now, if you've been in a situation where you've been on the staff side and you've been ignored, you've been mistreated, you've been disrespected, you know what that feels like. And I think that this is what partisanship has become, that people take a side. There are multiple sides to how things can get done. There are multiple perspectives on how things get done. And what we're talking about at the Emerging Leaders Conference is how to be inclusive. That does not mean that I embrace or accept everything that you say, do, or believe. But what it means is that I'm listening to your concept and I'm drawing out what will make sense for the greater good, because no one idea can serve the entire masses. That is difficult and almost impossible, if I can say that. But there has to be overlap of more than one idea that folks can get on board with and say, hey, I agree. Let's build on that. Let's make a connection there to benefit our constituencies.
I agree. I think that, everybody knows how I feel about labels and party lines. I just think that I really think it causes people to be closed-minded. Mm-hmm. And as a leader, you can't afford to be closed-minded. As a leader, if anything, you need to be open-minded. And I think as a leader, it's important for you to stretch yourself, to not surround yourself around yes people and people who agree with you all the time. Because otherwise, how are you stretching your own mind? How are you stretching yourself? How are you growing if you are not surrounded around people who challenge you? Philip talked about it 2 weeks ago. I challenge him all the time with stuff, and that's true. I mean, he challenges me. If you're just surrounded around people who only agree with your point of view, how are you growing? How are you seeing the other side of the coin? It's like you said, it's just like only listening to taking the management side and never listening to the people who are making it happen. Mm-hmm. To me, as a leader, I think we should be listening to the people that make it happen, if not more than we do management or those who are C-level. Why? Because they aren't in the thick of it. They aren't making it happen. In theory, we're sitting behind a desk or we're sitting in meetings and we're coming up with these grand ideas and we've got the vision. But when it executes, when when there's a gap between the vision and those who are executing the vision, you need to find out what's in this gap.
Right.
And that requires open communication and dialogue. And when open communication, that means actively listening. It's not sitting there on your phone. It's not checking email. It's not doing all of that while they're talking. It's actively engaged. It's eye contact. It's body language. It's repeating. It's asking questions if necessary, but it's making sure you understand fully what the person is saying. It's getting rid of all those detractors and all of that stuff that comes in that, you know, hinders your ability to understand what the person is saying, because you're not actively listening. But it's understanding what they are saying, but giving them your full attention, being present and in the moment. What I think we're seeing a lot of, and not just in the political sphere, but you see it with internet trolls. We see it everywhere. People aren't actively listening. They aren't paying attention. They're looking or they're listening for certain buzzwords or certain things. We have become a society of sound bites, and we think that this sound bite of somebody's life or what they're saying on social media or on the news or here or there is the end all to be all. No, that's just a clip. That's just a sound bite. What about the rest? And sometimes it's important to just sit back and wait for all of the stuff, all of the facts and information to come together before you make a decision. It's just like having, again, you've got the vision here, and that's fantastic. But as that vision is executed, how will you know what you need to tweak if you're not talking to the people who's making it happen, who's hearing the feedback from your customers or hearing the feedback from the American people or whatever it is? We've got to be able to have that information, that dialogue. I think was something that we saw that Van Jones did back in January. He did this series where he went around the nation, and it was like a love movement, and he was just literally talking to people around the country, just getting their perspective about how they feel about the election, about the nation and where we're going, and the importance of encouraging love and just that fostering inclusion, because that's what love does. It's all about inclusion. And I think we need to see more of that. Having someone who's willing to sit down and listen to the different perspectives of people to understand where they're coming from matters. And that's key in leadership.
Yeah, I just posted that leadership equals listening. You were talking about leadership as filling in the gaps. And there are so many gaps that exist that we're trying to fill politically, socially. Some decisions can't be made at the federal level, sometimes even not even at the state level. And there needs to be a recognition that, what those boundaries are. But I think for the people who are watching this, who are trying to glean what leadership is or isn't, it is about listening. It is more than about you. You are not the center of the universe because you have the title leader. I think that is a misnomer. One of my favorite thoughts about leadership, I was just writing about this a little bit yesterday, is what Jesus says. And he says that he who is great among you, he is your chief servant. He is at the bottom of the pyramid. And that is what's most important. And that is not only when you're representing your constituency in your organization or in your city or in your state, but even when you're around your peers who are leaders in their own right, and you're trying to push for a collective agenda. He who is great is a servant of all. How can I help you advance what you're trying to accomplish? How can I help you move forward your goal? I was reading a thought from Paul yesterday from the scriptures, who even said that you have to be more thoughtful, but you have to be more than thoughtful about your own intentions and your own goals. You have to have an equal concern about the thoughts and concerns of other people as well. It is a collective effort when leadership is involved. It is not about you. There are elements of self-preservation that comes into play, and yes, you take care of self first in instances where it just becomes natural. But when we're talking about the construct of leadership, the infrastructure of leadership, it is about this equal footing with other people. Yes, there are people who are subservient to you because of position, because of title, because of structure, because of education, experience, etc. But as a leader, you're a servant above all else. That's more important than anything else. I don't allow my staff, whether it's in the ministry, whether it's in my other businesses, to treat me as king. No, I'm here to help you serve and figure out how I can make your load lighter. Because most cases, your people who follow you are the front line of your business. They are the front line of your organization. And if they are not equipped to do their job, if they are not, if they don't have the tools necessary to be effective, to be the most productive group of people, then you as a leader have failed. It is not their fault. It is your fault. And so it is about listening. It is about filling in the gaps. And this kind of is a segue, Latanya, into our next piece of the conversation. We know that leadership is about influence. And, one of the funny questions, and I think Philip was hinting at this at our last show, that many people get caught up in when we talk about leadership in academia. And when you ask the question, are some of the nefarious characters in history good leaders? People are quick to say, no, they weren't good leaders because of what they did. The reality is the central definition of leadership is the ability to influence folk, good, bad, whatever. So we know that there are a bunch of leaders who fell on the right side and on the wrong side. But let's talk about the intentionality of being a positive influencer. What's the value of being a positive influencer? How does that change an organization's strategic competitiveness?
I would say, again, it boils back to what do you want as a business, as a country, as a community, or as a family, a church, whatever? What do you want people to see? What do you want reflected? I think we have to think about leadership as a reflection of self, and everything trickles down. It boils back to, I said this 2 weeks ago, I think I keep saying this: what is your why? In your business, what is your why for existing? Why did you start your business? And you have to keep that in perspective. It's not about what this person is over here doing or what your competitor is doing. Yes, you need to know your competition. You need to know what they're doing. You need to, have a good handle on that. But it's important for you to stick to know what your why is so that you can properly influence. To me, I think you should be influencing the people within your organization so that they can in turn influence the people that they touch. I agree with Richard Branson. Your most important customer is not your external customer. It's your internal customer. It's your employees, because if you don't take care of your employees, they're not taking care of anybody else, which means there's no influence. There's no reflection of what you value as a leader. So if you value service, for instance, but your people, you're not serving your employees, they aren't serving your customers, not at the level that you expect or want, because it's not happening. They're not getting the same thing that you're expecting them to give. So I think it matters. And the same thing with partnerships. If you're a business or organization who values relationship, for instance, why would you partner with an organization or person or business that doesn't value relationships? That's not even reflective in what they do. They're not influencing people to develop relationships, to partner, or do anything else like that. So I think it boils down to what is your why and what do you want reflected. You can't, and see, the thing about influence goes both ways. Are we influencing for good or bad? And who determines what's good and what's bad? Those terms are relative. I think I've said this. I mean, the Code Roundtables, this came out in the Code Roundtables like years ago about how even within the same country, honor and honesty is not on the same level, because they may not have a problem. One, taking bribes is not seen as a lack of integrity. Whereas on the other side of the same country, they felt that that was an issue. So it's some things are relative. So when we start talking about influence, we can clearly see that here in the political landscape. We've seen it for 8 years. We've seen it for, well, we can go back many, many years, any years. You can see how just politics influences people's lives. Again, go back to the statistics of racial, crimes up 20%. That's an influence. We may not want to admit it, but that is an influence of the political leadership that we have right now. Alternative facts. That's an influence of, their influence. And I don't agree. That's a lie. It's just another term for a lie. So what we're saying is when we have the highest level of leadership in the land, encouraging alternative facts, lies, whatever you want to call it, guess what? We're influencing people and we're saying it's okay. So now it puts a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of responsibility, but it puts a lot of additional focus on families and parents and people to have conversations in their own homes about, we don't do lies. I don't care if it's called an alternative facts or what. So now we're having conversations about this, which are basic values. And if we want to start talking about Christian values or whatever, these things that may conflict with whatever people believe, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Scientology, any other, belief system that's out there, if it conflicts, a lie is a lie is a lie, doesn't matter how you dress it up. Now we're having conversations and we're going back to explain why that's not a good thing. But guess what? That's still an influence. Doesn't matter. Same thing, rap videos and music videos and television shows and reality shows. All of this stuff influences people, but we don't see that as leadership. We don't see that these lifestyles that we put in front of people regularly is leadership. We don't see that as an influence in people's lives. We don't see that. We don't see that as these are role models that we're presenting not only to our children, but to the world. So now when we go travel somewhere, people think all Americans are like Love and Hip Hop or Housewives or whatever other television show. I mean, obviously the ratings are there because these people got seasons and you got Orange County and New Jersey and Atlanta and all these different cities. So obviously there's something there. And then there's one about Married to Medicine. And there's all of these different shows that's out there. And so when you travel, people think that this is what Americans are like.
Right. It's true.
So and it's just not that. I mean, it's industries, people think, oh, the modeling industry, the fashion industry is just like, this what we saw here on America's Next Top Model. That may not be the case. Or all models are just like that, or all photographers are all this and all that, all makeup artists are the same. That's not true. But what we're doing is we're presenting something. And again, all we're presenting is a soundbite, a clip of what, and it's all controversial. It's what sells and it's what's ratings and what sells. But I think that it might be an encouragement for a sense of community, meaning back where it used to be, where communities, it takes a village to raise a child, where we saw communities getting actively involved in the lives of people. And I think it matters because if we had that sense of community, again, we probably wouldn't see so much of missing people. All of these children and women that's going missing and all this human trafficking. I saw another one where 3 people, I want to say it was in Maryland, but I can't, I've got to look it up, where they just got arrested for trafficking, human trafficking. It's not like it hasn't been a big issue, but it's just, you're really seeing it at the forefront now. There's a lot of it going on. And it's just, when it comes to influence, I don't think there's a question of leadership being an issue of influence. I think it's a matter of what kind of influence that we're seeing and how we can shift that narrative from it being so toxic.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a quick note for folks. If you see the side of my head or me not looking directly at the camera, typically with the leadership conversations, I'm like manning our at least my social media page, and so I'm responding to folks, making posts, making notes, etc. So I am paying attention and listening, but I am kind of the producer behind the scenes. You're seeing it all. But just intentional. I'm not sure if can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. It kind of froze up a little bit, but now you're back.
Yeah, in terms of intentional leadership influence, there's a couple of thoughts that came to mind in terms of how to move forward with intentional leadership influence. Number one, I think it comes down to having a core belief system, which I think is kind of like a traditional cliche thing to say, but think about it, right? You said earlier, Latanya, that truth is relative,
Mm-hmm.
and people of faith kind of snarl at that and cringe at that. Here's the reality. If you have a particular faith tradition, your foundation of faith and belief and concept of truth and morality and leadership is based upon that faith system. If you are a leader that comes from a specific generation, age category, gender checkbox, or cultural background, your idea of leadership is shaped by that. Here's another example. I was watching Hotel Hell, one of my favorite shows, and not because it's Gordon Ramsay, but typically a lot of the shows I like is because, unfortunately, I'm the nerd in the group. I look for leadership lessons that I can learn from a business perspective. And Hotel Hell, which is hosted and starring Gordon Ramsay, provides some of that context. And there was the show I watched yesterday, which was a rerun, was of a woman of a different culture who was really running her hotel in the ground, unbeknownst to her, because of the leadership practices from her home country. And she did not take the time or the effort to learn leadership practices that were important to an American culture. Her previous business before buying a hotel was a sole proprietorship, which means that she was the only employee. She managed herself, managed her work, etc. She then transitioned to buying a hotel, which meant that she not only bought a business and a revenue generator when it comes to the customer renting rooms and buying food, she was now managing a team. And many people have different core beliefs that shape their behavior. And so when you talk about truth is relative, that is very true. You as an individual, as a leader, have to know what that relativity is. For me, my faith informs my leadership practices, my morality, how I view people, how I treat people. I believe the teachings of Jesus when he says that you treat others as you want to be treated, right? If you get slapped, turn the other cheek. It is about the kindness, the love that I must show to other people. And it's not about a sense of false humility or self-righteousness, but in fact, it is part of my development and growth and understanding how to influence people. And one of the greatest tricks I've learned is loving people. That is the foundation of my beliefs and how I function. Another idea of leadership beliefs comes from the reality of your team, the infrastructure of your team. I am not a fan of going into a new team with preconceived ideas of what effectiveness is or isn't. Now, one of my other favorite shows is The Prophet, starring Marcus Lemonis. He has a 3P process: people, product, and process. I have my own 3-step process: strategy, process, and leadership. I think all of those things are critical elements, but I got to tell you, I don't come in the room selling those things before I had a chance to meet a new team or understand their dynamics or understand the challenges that they are going through. I can tell you, in a new leadership role that I've taken on, I've developed 3 new core processes or 3 core beliefs that are a variation of what I believe is effective leadership. But those 3 core beliefs are essential to that team's particular sense of success. Again, as you said, Latanya, truth is relative. What is the truth for this particular organization, this team, part of this conversation in the political sphere? And I think for leaders who are trying to have a positive influence on teams, you have to understand the core beliefs. But I'm layering it by saying you got to have core beliefs that's relative to the folks you're dealing with. The other thought that I thought about here when you were talking, Latanya, let's see here. Okay, yeah. So intentional positive influence checks off the goals that are vital to a team's long-term success. You got to be intentional about your influence because there are goals you're trying to achieve. Nobody is in the business of leading just for the sake of leading. I mean, if you are, we need to have a conversation, right? There has to be a purpose behind your leadership. There has to be a purpose behind your team's existence. The intentionality of your leadership checks off those goals that are vital to making your job successful, making the job of your team successful. And one of my favorite terms about success and longevity, particularly in the nonprofit realm, is sustainability. How am I being intentional that in a way that will allow my nonprofit or my clients move closer towards being sustainable for an extended period of time without having to depend upon a single stream of revenue that could cut off at any moment? If you think about what's happening in the political sphere again, and a lot of nonprofits tend to be dependent upon government grants and government contracts, with shifting administrations comes shifting priorities, shifting funding priorities, shifting funding streams that are going to different departments. I can tell you I'm on the board of a nonprofit here in Connecticut. And one of our streams of income, mind you, I said one, of our streams of income is connected to a government agency. Fortunately, and I'm proud to say this, for this particular nonprofit, and before I joined them, they began the process of diversification and sustainability a long time ago. So if funding gets adjusted or cut, their funding is not solely dependent upon that one stream. Again, back to my point, intentional positive influence is about checking off specific goals that will lead to sustainability for your organization. There has to be a rationale behind why you're doing what you're doing and what outcomes you're looking to achieve as a result of that.
I agree. I'm typing up what you just said.
Well, as you're typing, I'll ask this as my last question. If you could speak to that one person who's watching right now, who says they do not need to be a leader, they don't want to be a leader, what would you say to them to change their mind?
I'd have to write this down. I would actually ask them a question.
Mm-hmm.
And that question is, why are you robbing the world of your unique footprint?
Ooh, okay.
We were created to leave a mark in this world. And when we don't, there's a void that has to be filled. The more voids, the more we hear, I wish someone would, ... When that person who's saying, I wish someone would, is the person that who should be doing it. So if you're the person that's saying, I wish somebody would do something about, maybe that person is you. It can be scary sometimes stepping into leadership, but don't see leadership as a title or something that you do. Just see it as who you are as a person.
Or a burden. Don't see it as a burden.
As a burden, no. See it as a responsibility that you're proud to display, to say, you know what? I'm leading the charge to spread love and light. To me, I'm leading the charge to spread love and light. God is love. We need more of it. So my charge is love and light. A+ leadership. How can you be a better version of yourself, maximizing your own potential? It's not hard. My footprint is my footprint. Dr. Clark's footprint is his footprint. We all have a part to play. And if we all play our part, we can see the change that we want to see. Why? Because we are it. It's just like that. You just be the change you want to see in this world. You will start to see it if you start stepping into that role of leadership. Don't see it as, like Dr. Clark said, as a burden or, because if you see it that way, that's how it's going to come across. But don't see leadership negatively. As your mind goes, so will the rest of you. But if you shift your mind and think about leadership in a positive way, think about what you put your hands to and what you want to see accomplished in a positive light, I guarantee you won't feel burdened. You won't feel weighed down, but you'll attack it with joy. Be passionate about it. See, leadership is about stepping into what you're passionate about. I'm passionate about people maximizing their potential, period. Being the best version of themselves and living life to the absolute full. That's how love and light is spread. Because when you are happy, when you can love and govern yourself, self-leadership, I'm telling you, you won't have to worry about, you won't be upset when you say, hi, how are you today? And somebody doesn't respond. You just keep going. Why? Because your mouth just released love and light into the atmosphere. And the more you do it, the more you'll find your neighborhood and you'll find people start speaking. That's what happened with me. I would speak to people when I go, hi, how are you? They wouldn't respond. And then next thing you know, it'll be a mumble, hi, I'm good. Doesn't matter, but I do it anyway. You put out what you want to get back. That's leadership.
Yep.
It's the essence of who you are. Your footprint is just a reflection of what you value, what you appreciate, what you believe. I believe God is love, and my job is to spread love and light, period, point blank. That's it. I attack my day with looking for opportunities to help people better themselves, to help people grow and to be the best version of themselves. It doesn't matter who that is. You don't know whose life you will change just by being you and by stepping into something different. So I would say, when you see this, I don't need to be a leader. No, that's not necessarily true. That's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about influencing, like Dr. Clark said, it's about influencing people. I gave a word to someone a few weeks ago out of meditation about coming out from behind where she is, because she doesn't see herself as a leader. This is a powerful question, because we asked that. The first person that came to mind was, she didn't see herself as a leader. She just wants to stay in the back. She just wants to serve. You are a leader already, because one, you have a heart to serve. You're already serving. You need to God is calling you out to be that example for other young women, and to not fall into debt, and to be that example of what it is to be successful, to be able to manage your money, but also come into another realm of financial responsibility. That's your leadership role for a generation of people. And if she doesn't step into that role, who's gonna fill that void? That's gonna help that generation of people that is already set aside for her to influence. There's a generation of people that's set aside for Dr. Clark. There's a generation of people who want to establish nonprofits somewhere that's waiting on him. What if he never stepped into that role and said, I'm just going to stick with real estate and I ain't going to deal with nonprofits? The same person, there's somebody in academia that's looking for you to step into that role to improve academia. You might have a problem with for-profit schools, or you may have a problem with nonprofits and how they're doing this and doing that. Okay, fine, step into it. Sometimes it's not hard. Sometimes you just step into it. Somebody will come along and understand your vision and come up underneath and undergird you and help you keep going. But if you don't step into it, you're going to keep saying, I wish somebody would. And all you're going to do is keep being frustrated by that void, because you're meant to fill that void. So I ask again, why rob the world of your unique footprint?
That was some good stuff. I would say this. Leaders exist at every level of every organization. And you do have leadership responsibilities, regardless of how you try to avoid them. That has been my primary lesson to my new team that I've taken leadership of recently, that even though I have the executive title, right, and I am at the top of the organizational chart, and yes, I'm using air quotations because that's being funny. But yeah, even though I have that title, the reality is my folks all the way down the chain have leadership responsibilities regardless of their job. The folks who are delivering the core service that our team provides are leaders because they are interfacing with our customers on a regular basis and doing it frequently. Their inability to be effective, their inability to be competent, their inability to connect with our customer base is showing a lack of leadership. Now, if that's showing a lack of leadership, then by being effective, by being competent, by connecting with our customers rather, is showing leadership.
Right.
You may not have the salary you want, you may not have the title you want, you may not have the position you want, but even by being on the team and interfacing with the customers, you are showing leadership. You are showing influence over the people who are benefiting from your services, who are utilizing your products, who are a part of your program, who are trusting their time in
Mm-hmm.
your nonprofit, who are trusting their time in your program, who are investing their emotions into your program, they are submitting themselves to your leadership, even at the lowest levels. Again, leaders exist at every level.
Right.
So that will be my response to somebody who would say, I don't want to be a leader. I will argue and say, you're already a leader. And here's my most basic argument that I get, that I share with everybody. If you're not leading other people, you're leading yourself at a minimum. Now,
That's right.
don't get me started talking about self-leadership, because that is my favorite leadership theory.
Yeah.
And I'm actually wrapping up something on that, and I get to that in my shameless plug. But we are leaders regardless of where we are in the organization, and
That's
you
right.
have to own that. I mean, you got to own it. You are a leader. I like what you said, Dr. Hughes, that don't rob the world of your unique leadership footprint. We need it. We
Mm-hmm.
need it. I've been taking a couple of courses lately, and it's been on church history. And what's being stressed in the course is that fallacy and false teaching was needed so that the church could understand how to articulate what is true and what is truth.
Mm.
But those of you who are saying, well, we don't need more terrible leaders such as fill in the blank,
Right.
I am not quick to promote the growth of terrible leaders and nefarious characters in our society, but we know that they exist.
Right.
When they pop up, when they show up, that is a chance for people to see a contrast between right and wrong,
Mm-hmm.
good and evil,
What not to do.
false and right, what not to do, what to do. And for those of you who desire to do what's right, who desire to rise above the mess in our political sphere, in our social sphere, in your organization, at your job, in your family, there needs to be a difference and a contrast. And sometimes that contrast pops up at the least opportune time. Listen, I've been there. I've done that. I've got the scars to prove it.
Right.
And so for those of you who are trying to avoid it, let me just challenge you. You are being tested. You are being pushed to show greatness in your own leadership.
Right.
Don't run from it. And as a matter of fact, you can't run from it.
Run into
You
it.
can't.
Right.
You got to run into it, because
it's gonna keep chasing you.
it's going to chase you. It's going to find you wherever you go. You got to chase. You got to run into it and face it. With that said, our time is up. But what is your shameless plug for today, Dr. Hughes?
Man, this was good. I could keep going.
Yeah, for sure. For
This
sure.
was good stuff. You guys know I love leadership. You can find me on Twitter, Dr. Latanya Hughes, TU Classified. You can find me on Facebook, Dr. Latanya Hughes. I have a website, www.globalmentorcoach.com. I have some books out, lots of books out. I just released one on A+ leadership. I will be actually be presenting about the A+ leader at Regent University in May. I think it's May 12th at the Leadership Roundtables discussion. The mission continues.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that this concept that I have, the A+ leader, is the gold standard of leadership. It's a new level of leadership that we need in this world as it relates to how you can be the best version of yourself as a leader, whether you're leading yourself or you're leading other people. I believe that we're always leading people, even when we don't know that somebody is watching us. And I won't even get into the whole Moses story, but that's me. So I have Pillars for Christian Mentoring, Pillars for Public Servants. And if you are a public servant, you probably want to get that book. I have a book of poetry out, beautifully spoken poems from the heart. I also contributed to a book on ethics and values. We took a look at Old and New Testament characters and to figure out what we can do ethically, and how we can have a contemporary application from that. And again, of course, my latest book is the A+ leader. So catch me on social media. I'm around. And if you want to call me, just hear my lovely voice again. You can call me at 754-333-0835 or email me at info@globalmentorcoach.com.
Cool. My shameless plugs. Number one, on social media, you can find me at Dr. William P. Clark, I believe, at everything. Dr. William P. Clark. on all social media platforms, primarily Facebook and Twitter. My website, elipatrick.com. It's a consulting service to nonprofits and churches focusing on leadership strategy and organizational development. Got a number of books out that are currently available, primarily leadership development for churches, leadership development for nonprofits. These are what I consider mini books. These are quick reads, easy reads, simple leadership in simple terms. In the coming weeks, hopefully, I'll be publishing my doctoral thesis from 2015 in its raw form, Sustainability for Nonprofits and Churches. So you'll get the chance to see how I spent most of my time on my doctorate degree. And I think I have a book that I'm working on now, Strategy Development for Nonprofits. I'm actually tweaking that. I will also be speaking at the Emerging Leaders Conference. I'll be lecturing on 2 topics on self-leadership and inclusive leadership. That conference is coming up on April 1st in Hartford, Connecticut. Feel free to be a part of that conference. You can go on the Eli Patrick Facebook page and you'll find that flyer where you can link up and register for the conference. We'd be glad to have you. I'll be lecturing at the Nonprofit Summit in Washington, D.C. On April 8th. I'll be talking about sustainability and how that's connected to self-leadership. So you have the chance to hear me lecture there. And I'll be lecturing at the Regent University roundtables as well, talking about sustainability, innovation, and self-leadership. So we got quite a bit going on over the next couple of months. I know Dr. Foster is busy as well, working on a number of projects, and Dr.
Or Sturdivant now.
What's her new last name?
Sturdivant.
What?
It's Sturdivant. S-T-U-R-T. Yeah, Sturdivant.
I heard you. I just never had a chance to pronounce it. Sorry, Karen.
And I might have said it wrong too, but forgive me. Don't hate me.
Karen, we still love you. She just got married, so she got a new last name. So Dr. Bolster, Dr. Sturdivant. I think that's how we say it. She's busy being a leader all throughout the state of Virginia. So she is with us in spirit.
Yes.
So guys, thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks for another edition of Leadership Conversations. Talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. Bye.
Wait a minute. Let me